I'm Lindsay, 21, and I need some advice. My mum, Marge, 46, didn't invite me to her wedding to her new husband because she labeled me problematic and mentally unstable, like my dad. So I showed up uninvited and crashed the wedding. To give you some context, my parents were a classic 80s couple. My dad, Sebastian, 48, was laid back and loved music, while my mum was the ambitious go-getter who wanted everything done yesterday. They met in college, fell in love, and then had me, their first child. From what I can remember, there was always some underlying tension between them. Dad had big dreams, but also struggled with anxiety and depression. He'd often feel overwhelmed when things didn't go as planned, leading to intense episodes where he'd shut down. It was like watching someone drown in slow motion, and as a kid, I didn't quite understand what was happening. Mom, on the other hand, was full of energy and had a strong need for control. She wanted everything to be perfect, including our family life. Unfortunately, her patience for Dad's struggles was limited. Instead of supporting him, she'd make snide remarks about his lack of motivation. I remember her saying in front of me once, "If he spent as much time doing something as he does worrying about it, we'd probably have a yacht by now." It was awkward, especially since I could see how hard Dad was trying to hold it all together. Feeling hurt by my mum's comments, which weren't intended to be cruel, often felt like she was pushing me further down. In her defense, she had her own pressures and expectations and didn't know how to handle Dad's issues constructively. As a kid, I always felt like I was walking on eggshells around her. Her critical nature made me constantly second-guess myself. I'd bring home a report card full of A's and one B, and she would focus solely on the B, saying things like, "You could have done better if you actually tried." It wasn't that she didn't care, she did, but her way of showing it was through criticism rather than encouragement. I think she believed she was motivating me, but it just left me feeling inadequate. Growing up, I received mixed messages from both parents. Dad was loving and supportive, but when he struggled, he really struggled. Mom was always pushing me to excel, but was never truly satisfied, and no matter how hard I tried, I could never quite meet her expectations. As the years went on, the tension at home escalated, and the cracks in their relationship became more apparent. Dad's mental health issues lingered and seemed to worsen, while Mum's frustration only added to his stress. It felt like a vicious cycle. She would have outbursts, and Dad would retreat further into himself. Their arguments became intense, and I often found myself caught in the middle, trying to mediate or simply stay out of the way. Eventually, everything came to a head when I was about 14. I remember the day vividly. What started as a small disagreement over who was supposed to take out the trash escalated into a full-blown screaming match. The tension in the house was palpable, and I could feel it weighing heavily on all of us. The moment Mom sat me down to tell me about the divorce felt surreal. I'd heard their arguments before, but hearing that they were separating was like the ground shifting beneath me. Mom's reasons centered on Dad's struggles with life and his mental health, which she said had become too much for her to bear. Dad was heartbroken. He tried to appear strong, but the hurt was evident. I wanted to remain neutral, but I was overwhelmed by anger and sadness. Angry at Mom for her harshness, angry at Dad for not fixing things, but mostly just feeling lost. The separation wasn't easy. Mom moved out and found a new place, while Dad stayed in the house that felt both familiar and oddly empty without her. We navigated the back and forth for a while, which was emotionally exhausting. I spent weekends with Mom and the rest of the time with Dad, and it felt like my world had split in two. Neither side felt like home. Then, just a few months later, everything changed again. Dad took his own life. It was a shock I could never have prepared for. One minute, I was trying to adjust to a new normal, and the next, I was faced with the devastating reality that someone I loved was gone forever. His passing left a massive void in my life, and I struggled to process the grief. I was angry at him for leaving us and confused about how to cope with the overwhelming loss. Mom was equally devastated, but her way of dealing with the pain was to immerse herself in work and social activities, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. As if things weren't complicated enough, Mom started dating someone new just a few months after Dad's death. When she introduced him to me, I initially felt hopeful. Maybe this new relationship would bring her some stability and happiness, helping us all to move forward. But then she broke up with him, and a few years later, she started seeing someone else. Mom was excited about this new guy and wanted everything to be perfect. She insisted we all act a certain way around him, as if we could just erase Dad and his struggles from our lives. The pressure was intense. She constantly reminded me to smile and behave whenever he was around. It felt like she cared more about appearances than about processing our grief together. I tried to keep up the facade for a while, but it was exhausting. I was still mourning, and it felt like she wanted me to wear a mask and pretend everything was okay. One day, I finally snapped. I told her I couldn't keep pretending and that her expectations were unrealistic given what we'd been through. I still hadn't forgiven her for how she treated Dad, and I needed to be honest about my feelings instead of hiding them. Mom didn't take it well. She got upset, accusing me of being selfish and ungrateful. In that moment, I realized that sometimes people aren't ready or willing to listen, no matter how much you want to be understood. After that argument, everything changed. Mom started excluding me from family events and gatherings, almost as if she was punishing me for not playing along with her perfect image. Our relationship was clearly strained, as if she had drawn a line in the sand, and I was on the wrong side. Things worsened when I learned from my brother that Mom was engaged. It caught me off guard, since she hadn't mentioned anything directly to me. Our conversations had become sporadic and awkward, so I wasn't sure how to reach out. I decided to send her a short, congratulatory text. "Hey Mom, I heard about your engagement. Congratulations. I hope you're happy." I thought it was a nice gesture to show support and bridge the gap between us, even though it felt like we were worlds apart. But then the kicker, she didn't respond at all. I was hurt and confused, but I knew our relationship was rocky, and maybe she was dealing with her own issues. I tried to brush it off, but it lingered in my mind. Then my brother dropped a bombshell. At her wedding rehearsal dinner, Mom made a harsh announcement about why I hadn't been invited. According to him, she said in front of everyone that I wasn't there because I was problematic and mentally unstable, like Dad, like daughter. Those words cut deep. I was already struggling with my feelings about everything, and hearing her label me so harshly in front of her new family and friends felt like a gut punch. It was as if she was publicly distancing herself from me, using me as a scapegoat for her own choices. I felt like she was casting me as the villain in her story, and it was hard to bear. It was painful to realize she was using my mental health struggles as a reason to exclude me from her life. It felt like everything I had endured was being twisted against me, making me feel invalidated and unimportant. It was as if my struggles were being manipulated to support a narrative she was trying to create. That's when I began to devise a plan. I had always struggled to manage my emotions, and in that moment, it felt like I needed to make a statement. I knew it wasn't the healthiest approach, but it seemed like the only way to express my hurt. My idea was to show up at Mom's wedding reception and make a dramatic point. After Dad passed away, I had been sorting through his belongings, searching for a sense of connection. In the process, I discovered a collection of his diaries. These were not just random notes. They contained detailed accounts of his life, his thoughts, and his struggles. Reading them was eye-opening. He had written extensively about how Mom treated him during their marriage, how her criticism and dismissiveness affected him deeply. There were hundreds of pages documenting his emotional pain and challenges. At first, I was unsure what to do with the diaries. Part of me wanted to keep them as a way to remember Dad and honor his memory. But as I read and understood the depth of his suffering, I felt a surge of anger. It seemed unfair that Mum was moving on so quickly without acknowledging the impact of her actions. I thought perhaps sharing some of his experiences could shed light on the truth. Dad's own words might reveal the truth about their relationship and offer a different perspective. So I decided to attend Mom's wedding reception and make a statement. I knew it was a bold move, but I felt compelled to speak up. I wanted to challenge the public image she had created and show what was really happening behind closed doors. On the day of the wedding, I arrived at the venue, feeling both nervous and determined. As I walked into the reception hall, it felt surreal to be part of what seemed like a fairy tale. Mom and her new husband were greeting guests, and everything looked perfect. But for me, it was just a facade, and I was ready to reveal the truth. When there was a lull in the festivities, I seized the moment. As guests gathered and the mood relaxed, I picked up the microphone. My heart raced, but I was resolute. I cleared my throat and said, "Excuse me, everyone. I know this is a joyous occasion, but I need to share a few words." The room fell silent, and I felt the weight of their gazes on me. Taking a deep breath, I began to read excerpts from Dad's diaries, focusing on the struggles he faced with Mom's behavior and how it left him feeling belittled and emotionally drained. I shared the painful moments he described, highlighting the impact of her words and demands. This wasn't about airing grievances, it was about uncovering the reality behind their marriage. As I spoke, I noticed the shock on people's faces. Some looked uncomfortable, others were visibly upset. Mum's expression was a mix of disbelief and anger, while her new husband appeared bewildered, trying to make sense of the situation. The room's atmosphere shifted from celebratory to tense as Mom approached the microphone, trying to intervene, but I wasn't ready to stop. I needed to express the depth of Dad's pain and its impact on our family. I wanted people to see the fuller picture, beyond what Mom had shared. When I finally finished, I handed the microphone back and left, not wanting to witness the fallout. I knew I had stirred strong emotions and needed space to process it all. In the days that followed, my phone buzzed with messages and calls. Some were sympathetic, while others were angry or confused. Mom didn't reach out to me directly, but through my brother and mutual friends, I learned she was furious. She felt I had disrespected her special day and was hurt by the public exposure of her past. After the chaos of the wedding reception, I felt emotionally drained and knew I needed distance to sort through my feelings. I decided to block Mom's number and social media, thinking if she needed to reach me, she would find a way. For now, I couldn't handle any more drama. A week passed as I tried to return to a semblance of normalcy, diving into a new project at work and focusing on self-care. I didn't expect to hear from Mum. If anything, I was bracing for anger and blame. So it came as a shock when my brother called one afternoon, sounding frazzled. "Hey, I don't know if you've heard, but Mom's marriage ended," he said, almost hesitantly. I was stunned by what my brother was telling me. "Wait, what? Mark left Mom?" He didn't have all the details, but from what he gathered, it happened pretty suddenly. Apparently, Mark moved out just a few months into their marriage. My brother wasn't sure why they split, but he mentioned hearing vague things about disagreements and mounting tensions. It sounded like things fell apart quickly, which made me question how ideal Mum's new relationship really was. "Do you know if Mom's okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned. Despite everything that had happened, my brother wasn't sure. He said Mom was putting on a brave face, acting like everything was fine, but he could tell she was struggling. It was clear she was in a tough spot, and it made me think about how much pain she might be experiencing. Even though I was hurt by how she treated me, I didn't want to see her suffer. After the call, I sat there trying to process the news. Part of me felt a sense of vindication, like maybe this was some kind of cosmic payback for everything that had happened. But another part felt a pang of sympathy. Mum was clearly dealing with a lot, and as much as I had been hurt, I understood what it was like to navigate the fallout of failed relationships. I didn't reach out to her. It was a complicated mix of emotions. On one hand, I wanted to be there for her. On the other, I didn't want to make things worse by reopening old wounds. Plus, I was still blocked from her social media and hadn't unblocked her number yet. However, I didn't have to wonder for long. Last night, she showed up at my door. My door burst open without warning while I was in the middle of a movie. The late hour made me think it was a mistake or perhaps a prank, but the persistent banging quickly escalated. I opened the door to find Mom, stumbling and clearly drunk. Her hair was a mess, her clothes wrinkled, and the smell of alcohol hit me from 5 feet away. She was causing a scene in the hallway, shouting and sobbing, her words slurred and chaotic. "Why'd you do this to me? Why'd you ruin everything?" Her voice echoed, her bloodshot eyes revealing a lack of sleep. This was a stark contrast to the composed image she had tried to maintain during her wedding and marriage. I knew I couldn't leave her out there, not only because of the disturbance, but because she needed help. Sighing, I let her in, hoping she'd calm down once inside. I led her to the living room and urged her to sit. "Mom, you need to calm down," I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. "What's going on? Why are you so upset?" Ignoring my questions, she continued her tirade, her accusations bouncing off the walls. "You ruined everything. I thought you'd make things right, but you just made it worse. Mark left me because of you." The more she yelled, the clearer it became just how intoxicated she was. Her speech was jumbled, and she kept repeating herself, making it exhausting to listen. Still, I tried to be patient. Despite everything, I couldn't overlook how much she was struggling. A lot of pain swirled around her as her yelling faded into slow, muffled sobs. Her energy seemed to drain away, and she sank to the floor, curling up like a child. Within minutes, she was passed out, snoring loudly on my living room carpet. I stared at her, a mix of emotions churning inside me. I felt anger at how she had come into my home and treated me, and frustration at the entire situation. But there was also pity. Seeing her so vulnerable and broken reminded me that she was human too, struggling in her own way. Deciding it was best to leave her be, I grabbed a blanket from the closet and draped it over her before retreating to my bedroom and shutting the door. I needed some sleep too, and couldn't handle any more drama at that moment. The next morning, I woke up to find her still there, sleeping soundly on my floor. As I made my way to the kitchen, I heard her stirring faintly. I wasn't sure how to approach the situation. Part of me wanted to let her wake up on her own, while another part knew I couldn't ignore her completely. I brewed some coffee, trying to gather my thoughts. I had no idea how she'd react. Would she be embarrassed, angry, or even apologetic? I hoped that after sleeping off the alcohol, she might be open to a real conversation. But by the time I returned to the living room with my coffee, she was already gone. The blanket lay crumpled on the floor, and remnants of her outburst, scattered tissues and an empty coffee cup, told the story. A pang of guilt hit me as I surveyed the mess she left behind. Left behind. It was clear she had been through a tough time, and seeing her like that made me question whether my dramatic entrance at her wedding reception was too harsh. In the days that followed, guilt gnawed at me as I replayed the scene in my head. Had I crossed a line? Was it fair to expose her personal struggles so publicly? While I felt she needed to grasp the impact of her actions, I couldn't help but wonder if there was a better way to handle it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hey everyone, many of you asked about my dad's diary. I won't share everything, but here are a few excerpts. March 12, 2005. She told me again that I'm weak and useless. She said she regrets ever marrying me. I don't know how much longer I can take this. June 18, 2007. She laughed at me when I mentioned my anxiety attack. She said I'm just looking for attention. I feel so alone. December 24, 2008. Christmas is supposed to be a happy time, but all she does is criticize me. She said I'm ruining the holidays for everyone. I just want to disappear. Reading these entries always breaks my heart. I hope that anyone facing similar struggles finds the strength to overcome. Update 2. Hey guys, based on your suggestions, I reached out to my mom, but I haven't heard back. It's been a few weeks since I sent her that letter, and I guess I shouldn't be too surprised considering how things went down. I thought she might need some time and space. Meanwhile, I learned some new details about what happened between her and Mark from my brother, which adds another layer to this already complicated situation. My brother shared some details about why Mark left Mom so suddenly. Apparently, Mark has a younger brother who has been struggling with depression for a while, and it's been a tough situation for their family. Just days after the wedding, Mark's brother found out that Mom had been bad-mouthing him and mocking his mental health issues. I was shocked to learn that my mum could be so cruel, especially about something so serious. This wasn't just idle gossip. She was harsh and dismissive, which is a huge red flag for anyone sensitive about mental health. Hearing this mixed my feelings. On one hand, it was appalling, but on the other, it made sense why Mark would quickly end the marriage if he discovered his new wife was being disrespectful to his family. As we discussed this, my brother suggested we try to find out more about Mark's brother and maybe reach out to him. He thought it could help to understand how he was doing and perhaps offer an apology on Mom's behalf. It felt like a long shot, but I agreed that it might be worth trying to mend some bridges. We managed to track down Mark's brother through mutual connections, and after some thought, I decided to reach out. I wanted to handle the situation with care, delicately knowing that he had every right to be angry and hurt. I sent him a message explaining who I was and acknowledging that I was aware of the situation. I apologized for what Mom had said and done, even though I wasn't directly responsible. I also expressed my hope that he was getting the support he needed and that I genuinely wished him well. To my surprise, he responded. He was understandably cautious, but appreciated the gesture. We had a few exchanges where he explained a bit more about how he was coping and how he had felt hurt by Mum's comments. He also mentioned that he was in therapy and working on his mental health, which was a relief to hear. It was a small step toward making things right, and while I knew it wouldn't fix everything, it felt like a start update. Hi everyone. I know it's only been a few days since my last update, but things have taken some more twists and turns. So here's the latest. My brother has been trying really hard to reach out to Mom, hoping to patch things up, or at least get some clarity on where things stand. Unfortunately, things she wasn't answering, which was really unlike her, especially since she's usually so responsive. After many calls and a bit of searching, my brother discovered that Mom had left town to visit her sister. Apparently, she had told him to stop bothering her and to leave her alone. She made it clear she didn't want to talk to him, or by extension, anyone from our side of the family. It was a tough blow, and I felt a pang of sympathy for my brother. He was just trying to reach out, maybe to mend things, but it seemed like Mom was shutting everyone out completely. Hearing this news left me feeling conflicted. On one hand, I understood that she was likely overwhelmed and struggling with her emotions. It must be incredibly hard for her to face everything that had happened and deal with the fallout of her actions. On the other hand, it was frustrating and disheartening to see her isolating herself and refusing to address the issues. It felt like she was avoiding the very conversations needed for any kind of healing. My brother and I talked about it, and he shared how disheartened he felt. He genuinely wanted to help and support her, but her refusal to engage made him feel like his efforts were futile. It's tough when you're reaching out and someone just pushes you away. He mentioned considering giving her more space for now, hoping she'd come around when she was ready. It's a difficult decision, and he's unsure of the best approach. Thanks for reading and for all the support and advice you've given so far. I really appreciate it. Haven't gone as smoothly as we'd hoped. A few days ago, my brother decided to make another attempt to see Mom. He thought maybe some time had passed and she might be more open to talking things through. He showed up at her place hoping to have a calm conversation and maybe start rebuilding some bridges. But when he arrived, she refused to even let him in. She slammed the door in his face, and from what he described, it was pretty harsh. It felt like a punch in the gut, especially since he was only trying to be there for her and figure out a way forward that wasn't the end of it, though. A couple of days later, my brother tried to check in again, thinking that maybe things had cooled down a bit. He knocked on her door and tried calling her, but